This is lesson 58 from Saxon Algebra 1. They talk in lesson 58 about percent word problems. And often we write percent with that little percent symbol. It is absolutely necessary to be able to visualize percent word problems in order to work them effectively. There's no shortcut to doing this, so it's often helpful if we draw a little graphic or a little picture to remind us of our before and our after diagrams. So they're diving right in to a problem, and I'm going to write that out for you. Okay, so here is our problem. Kathy, John, and Susie have only 20 chickens left. They began with 80 chickens. What percent of the original flock remains? So what they'd like you to do is start by drawing a diagram. So a lot of times they like to just start with these ovals. Make mine a little bigger so there's plenty of room to write inside of my oval. So my first oval is going to represent the before, and my whole oval is going to represent 100%. So this whole oval space is representing 100%. And because they told us in the problem that they began with 80 chickens, that's the before scenario. That means I had 80 chickens in there. And now if I draw an after, so something changed, and I'm really trying to draw my second oval as close to the same size because I'm trying to represent the same 100%. So I'm trying to keep it as close as I can. But we have to recognize we only have 20 chickens left. So a small portion of those chickens are left. So I'm just going to take out a little slice and say that's representing the 20 that are left. So I started with this big circle of 80, but now I'm just left with a small portion of 20. So something happened to the rest of the chickens, and the rest of the chickens have to be 60, because if I started with 80 and I went down to 20, I only have something happened to 60 chickens. But what they're asking the question, we'll go back and read the question part of the problem, is what percent of the original flock remains? So really what we're searching for is asking 20, which is how many chickens we have left, is what percent of 80, because that was our original amount. So we can write an equation to solve that. And here is our percent equation. What percent, using WP, and because it's a percent, we're putting it over 100, because that's the percent part. So what percent of, because multiplication always represents our of, 80 is 20. So again, rereading this problem, what percent of 80 is 20? So I'm going to erase this so it doesn't get confusing of how I'm solving this from here. So to solve for the what percent, oops, sorry about that. So to solve for the what percent, we need to multiply both sides of this equation by 100 because there's a 100 in the denominator. And then we also need to divide each side by 80 because there's an 80 in a numerator. So that means I can multiply on both sides of the equation by 100 over 80. That allows these hundreds to cross out, this 80 and this 80 to cross out, making our goal of leaving what percent on one side of the equation. And on the other side, we now have 20 times 100 divided by 80. And when we solve that out, I can cross out these zeros, so I end up with 200 over 8. Or if I solve that further and divide 200 by 8, I get 25%. So I just discovered that 20 is 25% of 80. So they like you to sometimes come back up here, and next to my 20 I'll write is 25%. And that means 60 is the remaining percent, because if this needs to equal 100% total, it's 100 minus 25 to say 60 is representing 75%. So what that really means in the problem we were solving is if Kathy, John, and Susie started out with 80 chickens, went down to only 20 chickens, that means they lost 75% of their flock and only kept 25% of their flock. So let's do one more example of percents so that you have it here. And we're going to do one, I'd say, that goes over 100%. So here's our next problem. It says Bo and Christy hide 600 raisins. This is 60% more than they hid last month. How many raisins did they hide last month? So a diagram will always be our first step. We're going to start with a nice oval representing 100%. So again, just like the other problem, this will be our before, 100%. And then this is representing last month. So we want to find out how many raisins they hid. We know that they hid last month, but we don't know what that is yet, obviously. But now, again, when they're telling us that what they hid this month is 60% more than they hid. So the next oval I draw needs to stay larger than the original oval, because we're hiding more this month than last month. So this is the after. And they're telling us how many raisins. There were 600 raisins, and that's representing 60% more than last month. Now here's the tricky thing. It's not saying that it's just 60%. It's saying it's 60% more. So we need to look at it as 160%. So if you have the same amount this month as last month, that equals 100%. So if you're talking about 60% more than before, you need to add that to the original 100%. So that's where sometimes these problems go wrong, is you just write a 60% there. But really, we've increased it this month by 160%. So we're going to use this diagram to help us write our statement that can be used to solve the problem. So if we use the same formula we did before, saying what percent of something equals something, we will fill this in by saying 160% of last month's is 600. So again, we found this by using our what percent of is formula. And they told us the 60% more, the secret to that more is adding 100% in. So we have 160% written here. And then 160% of last month's will equal 600. So we're using all the given information, and again what we're searching for is last month. So to solve this, to get the LM by itself, I'm going to multiply by 100 over 160 so that those cross out. And of course I need to do that on both sides of the equation. So I can cross out the 100s, cross out 160. So I'm left with LM on one side. And then I'm going to cross out a 0 here just to make my solution a little bit simpler. So that becomes 6,000 over 16. And I can put that in a calculator or solve it out. When you divide it, it becomes 375. So what that's essentially saying is that 375 is how many raisins were hidden last month. So I'm going to put that up here. 375 raisins were the 100% we did last month. And this month we did they hid 600 raisins, which again is 160% more than before. So please reach out to me if you have any other questions. These are very complex to sometimes think about, but the key is to start with using this formula and to always write a diagram to help you visualize what you're looking for.